Hey community, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm Dr. Blaire, a doc in clinical psychology. And on this channel, we discuss psychology, inspiration, social justice, and all topics in between. I need you to first hit that subscribe button. I need to see you back next week. And of course, stay tuned if you could benefit from a discussion around how to be prepared for an emergency psychologically. Stay tuned. So before we jump into today's video, I want to acknowledge a few things. First thing is it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So you will be getting mental health awareness type content all month long. Prepare yourselves, hold on to your chair because it's going to get intense. I want to take the time to acknowledge some of you who have been in the comments consistently. I am still at my humble beginnings and I am so grateful for you not only watching, but of course sharing, subscribing, and commenting. It shows me where your thoughts are after a video and I greatly appreciate it. So I want to acknowledge 4 of you this time. That is Van Gogh and Coco, King Stefan, Mimi, and Marianne Watts. Thank you so much. I appreciate you deep down in my heart. Today, we will be discussing content that may be triggering for many of you, and I want to acknowledge that. So, I encourage you to watch this in clumps and or use healthy coping mechanisms along the way. Let's do a quick flashback to 2020, which honestly for many of us feels like not that long ago because this has just been a long blur of a past couple of years. But we all were hit with the pandemic hard collectively, right? And we've also had major influxes in shortages. We've had some drastic changes in prices, flights. Y'all need to get it together because it's a hot mess. But we also have natural disasters that typically happen, but it can happen at any point in time. It can sometimes feel a little unpredictable. And now we have a war happening across the world for some of us, and it could hit our front doors at any point in time. All of these are signs of we need to be prepared for an emergency. And if you hadn't learned anything from the pandemic, I hope we learned to be prepared. Be ye also ready. We don't want to be in a situation where we're having to scramble, where we're running last minute to get supplies or to get the things that we needed. We should be in a position where we are prepared if possible. If you have the resources, if you have the connections, you want to be prepared, not reactive. We want to be proactive in being prepared and having the things that we need so that we can all not only survive, but possibly be in a better position to thrive moving forward. I believe that emergencies impact us in a few different areas, starting with our physical body and our physical environment, our social/love life, our work life, and our spiritual life. And Samhsa uses these 3 points in an emergency. 1 is to prepare, 2, respond, and 3, to recover. And we're going to use this as a structure, a framework, so that we can make sure that we're best prepared. There isn't enough research around being psychologically prepared in an emergency because we often focus on the physical. We often focus on our physical environment and our physical selves, which actually makes sense because when we're looking at the Maslow hierarchy of need, our basic needs, that's where that is going to fall under. But we seem to neglect the psychological, and what research does actually tell us is that when we are psychologically prepared and or in a better situation where we're more stable, it increases the chances that an emergency will hurt us less. Now, I don't know anyone who would intentionally choose a situation where they're going to hurt more. Most of us are going to choose the option that's going to hurt less, that's going to be less painful. And that does not mean that you're not going to hurt at all. I didn't say that. Don't run off and start putting words in my mouth. What I am saying is that we want to be in a situation that we are not only preparing our lives, our environment, ourselves, and that we have the resources that are needed, but that we are also preparing ourselves psychologically so that we have the psychological stamina, the willpower to be able to withstand an impact. And it makes me think of the Titanic when they were coming up to the the iceberg, they all were kind of saying impact, preparing for impact. And so you kind of grab hold, or if you ride the L, if you're from Chicago, you ride the L, you coming up to a stop, you probably need to grab hold to something so that you can prepare for the impact of the train getting ready to stop, because the momentum is going to shift and change, and it'll likely put you in a situation where you're going to be a little wobbly, or you could fall if you don't take hold to something. I want to make sure that we are taking hold to something that is needed so that we can withstand the impact that could come from an emergency. So here are 5 things that I want you to focus on as you are preparing for an emergency. These 5 things will influence your psychological state in an emergency and or prior to an emergency. So number 1 is financial literacy and physical resources, which could have a great impact on your psychological state and well-being. And just to kind of parse this out a little bit more, when we look at physical resources, like during the pandemic, everybody was running to the store to get some toilet paper for whatever reason, and all of the stores were out, or prices were jacked up crazy high for just like four rows of toilet tissue that was just out of the norm, right? We don't want to be in a situation where we're having to pay $10 for 4 rows, but be in a situation where you have some at home, and if you are at the store and it just so happens to get some, you can get some extra. But you don't want to be in a situation where you don't have what you need, your basic needs. And the same thing for financial literacy. This is getting at how you spend your money and why. We all have access to X amount of dollars, and that looks different per household, but how do you use what you have and use it wisely? So paying attention to your spending, paying attention to your budget, and paying attention to what your resources are and how you use it is going to be so important as you are in the preparation stage for an emergency. Now, how is this actually going to influence your psychological state of being? Well, think about it. When you're in a situation where you don't have what you need, you don't have enough food, you don't have enough supplies, and you don't have enough money, does that not add stress to you? Are you not in a situation where you are distressed and you're worried about your next often? Well, if you're in a situation where you're taking care of these things, then you don't have to worry about your next. You are instead going to have decreased anxiety, decreased worry, and you're not as afraid about the next day. You are instead probably thinking about the next week or the next month, and then you are in a situation where you're often proactive instead of reactive and behind the bar. That is how we want to make sure that we have improved financial literacy and improved access to physical resources if possible. If you'd like an itemized list of items that you could be storing up, feel free to go over to my Instagram and Facebook page at Dr. Blaire for an itemized list. It is by far not exhausted, but it'll help get you started, and that one's for free. Okay. Now, number 2 is your social support system. And I don't think I really have to drill this point in very hard, simply because a lot of people can see the value in having a support system. But for the sake of the video, I think it's important that we have a support system, no matter how large or small, how close-knit or far apart. It's important that you identify who is on your team. Who do you feel comfortable going to when in need?
SOS means someone help me. It's not healthy.
Who do you feel comfortable going to just to kind of pour your heart out to? And can they do that back with you? Is it a bi-directional relationship? Can you all both come to one another? And again, emphasis on it does not matter how big or how small the group is, as much as you feel confident and assured of who that support member is in your system, in your group. That's most important, because you're going to need other people to lean on. We are all interdependent people, and I know a lot of times we run around talking about Miss Independent, I can do it all, by myself, but that's not really how life is designed. That is not how God intended for us to be. God did not design us to be alone. So he designed us to be with one another and to work with one another. And that again comes down to support. In emergencies, we oftentimes see in media how people are then able to come and be unified. Don't wait until an emergency to unify yourself with a group. Make sure that you are connected to someone now. Have those relationships now. Build on those relationships, not for selfish reasons. I mean, it's just good to have all in all. But when an emergency comes, you want to make sure that you have someone that you're linked up in, because this by far is not the season to be alone in. This is not the season to be isolated. This is a season to be connected with other people. We had enough isolation before. It is time to put that in the past and move forward. So identify who your support system is. Now, three is to develop a skill, a life skill specifically, and or a trade. You want to make sure that you have a skill that's going to contribute to your survival. So this could look like gardening, fishing, knitting, cooking, or even carpentry. And for some of you, you're thinking, well, I do this all the time. I got this down packed. And others are like, girl, I have no clue what you're talking about. I only think about these things like I've never done it before. And that's okay. Make sure that you're starting now. Explore what could be your wheelhouse. If all of life completely does a turnabout and changes, you want to make sure that you have the skills that are needed, not only for you to survive, but also for you to be in a position where you can thrive. And that's where that trade in or that life skill comes in handy, because it gives you an opportunity to not only contribute to your life, but contributes to others. And it keeps you moving. And a lot of people are wondering like, well, how does this actually impact my psychological well-being? It's similar to the first tip around you want to make sure you have access to resources, and or you want to make sure that you are, being financially literate. This is going to the same thing, that if you do not have the skills or the life skills so that you are surviving, it gravely has a negative impact on your psychological state. But also when you do, it keeps you productive. It keeps you contributing to society. It keeps you moving. And I don't know if you've ever had a moment where you've gotten completely detached and you disengaged from life and you're not really doing much of anything. It actually doesn't help you much. I know sometimes we have this misconception that it's going to give me a break. I'm going to feel more relaxed. But actually, if you stay there too long, you start to slip back behind. And we don't want to slip behind. We want to continue to move forward. In an emergency, it's going to be so important that you continue to move forward, because there's so much happening around you that can make you feel like life is not going so great and things are, doom and gloom. But instead, if you are being productive and you're moving forward, you have something to contribute to yourself, to your household, and or potentially can expand beyond your household. It helps you to feel like you are contributing, like you're fulfilling a purpose. And that has a good impact on your psychological state. So, number 3, develop a life skill, develop a trade. That's going to help you. Number 4 is to develop and strengthen your use of intentional, healthy coping mechanisms. That all sounds fancy. Let's break it down. That looks like you may enjoy going on nature walks, but what if you're in a flooded area? You're not doing any nature walks then. Or you enjoy going to the gym, but what if you don't have access to the gym again? You have to be flexible in your use of coping mechanisms and build upon the skill. Now, what's that mean? Those are actually two different things. The first thing is a mechanism. These are actually the tools, the thing that you are doing in order to cope. The skill is how well you use it in a situation. And I always want to make sure that we distinguish the difference between using a coping mechanism and building on the skill, simply because there's a big difference in using a coping mechanism that is appropriate to the situation and the time and place. So as I mentioned, if you're in an area where you're not able to do a nature walk, you have to be flexible on something else that you can use that's going to help you, that is both healthy and intentional to the situation, time, and place. So a quick example may look like if you're in a situation where you are needing to cope, but it's a fire, it's not really going to be appropriate for you to then say, well, I'm going to sit down and do a meditation. I'm going to be mindful, do some deep breathing. No, you're in an emergency. You need to get out of the fire. You need to get to safety. But it would be appropriate to still be able to give yourself some affirmations, tell yourself that you will get to safety, give yourself some type of encouragement. some internal dialogue, that is still a coping mechanism, and it is healthy, and it will actually help you to get to where you need safety. And so doing some deep breathing while you're telling yourself that will be an intentional use of that coping mechanism. And the more that we are actually using our healthy coping mechanisms, we build on the skill to be able to know when it's appropriate and when it's not. And the more that we pull on our flexibility allows us to know what to use in emergency, what not to use in an emergency, and actually be able to switch up depending on the situation. So make sure that you are developing coping mechanisms. You have more than one or two. Continue to build on that list. Continue to be intentional about healthy coping mechanisms. Emphasis on healthy, because there's a long list of unhealthy coping mechanisms. But instead, we want to make sure that we're using healthy ones and that we are building on our skills while being flexible. And five is to hang tight and close to your spirituality. Continue an open dialogue, communication, prayer with God as He will guide you. You want to make sure that you are using His wisdom as He is telling you to go left or right, and also hold near and dear to your heart the promises He has made to you, and believe that it is yes and amen. And I know that not everyone who is watching this video is a believer and follower of Christ like I am, and I invite you to get to know Him as He wants to get to know you and have a close relationship with you. But I also want to be respectful that others have different beliefs and faith tenets than my own, and I respect that. Now, because of that, I also want you to know that the principles don't change. The principles of this point is still the same. Hang tight to what you believe as it contributes to your hope. And in situations like an emergency, when things feel very gloomy and things feel very low and like there isn't much of a future to look forward to, you want to make sure that you are holding on to what reassures you, what you believe before all of this happened. No matter what the circumstances are, hold tight to what you believed before, because those are the things that's actually going to help you to pull through. Remember, all of these points that we have talked about is to help you to not only survive, but also get to a place where you are striving. We are being proactive. We are in a preparation stage of making sure that we can move forward. We can remain productive, and you don't want to stay stagnant and or fall behind. And because of all of that, we have to be sure that we are remaining hopeful, and faith does that very thing for many of us. So hang tight to what you believe your core values are, because that is going to help you to have more faith, and to also have hope. And while you're having more hope, of course, that is going to positively contribute to your psychological state. Because if you lose hope, it's not looking good from that point on in an emergency. We want to have hope. We want to have faith. I want you to believe. As you're evaluating these 5 different steps, you want to be sure that you are also taking a look at what does it look like in the 3 stages that we discussed earlier: prepare, respond, or recover. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you are thinking,
This time, please, someone come and rescue me. I'm losing my mind, you got me losing it.
but instead that you are feeling like you are psychologically prepared and you are able to withstand the woes of life that could come at any point in time. Make sure that you are taking hold to these principles and you apply it right now as we are in the preparation stage, y'all. Be encouraged. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Share this with everyone. I believe we all could benefit from being psychologically prepared for an emergency. And be sure that you are dropping down into the comments other ideas that you have. This is not an exhaustive list, just a few pointers that I thought of. And I didn't want this, this video to be too long. But if you have other ideas for the community to see, please feel free to share. This is not to overwhelm you, but to be sure that we all have a variety variety of options to choose from. And head over to my Instagram and or Facebook page at Dr. Blaire for that itemized list of resources that I mentioned earlier. Remember, it is for free. Prepare your household. And of course, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I have a special guest that will be joining me next week. So be sure that you are here next week and you have hit that subscribe button and be the first to know when that video is going to be dropping next week. And before I go and see you next week, remember, if I'm great and you're great, then we're a great community.